First item of business is request for bill introductions. Do we have any requests? Seeing none, committee, we had minutes from February 26th for your review. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Seeing none, to entertain a motion on accepting the minutes. Representative Long, and a second, Representative Shu. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Committee, our next item of business is a hearing on Senate Bill 227. And I'll turn to the reviser for an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 227 amends the tax credit for qualified expenditures for restoration and preservation of a historic structure by providing for different percentages based on a city populations of more than $50,000 or $50,000 or less with varying amounts of expenditures to qualify for the credit. The bill amends the allowable credit amounts depending on the size of the city or township where the expenditure occurs. Under the changes of the bill, this would allow for a 25% credit of qualified expenditures located in a city with a population of more than 50,000, and the amount of such expenditures equals at least $5,000 but less than $50,000. 40% credit for qualified expenditures located in a city with a population of more than 50,000, and the amount of such expenditures would exceed $50,000. 40% credit of qualified expenditures located in a city, a township, or an unincorporated area with a population of 50,000 or less, and the amount of such expenditures equals at least $5,000. Then lastly, a 40% credit of qualified expenditures of a qualified historic structure, which is exempt from federal income taxation, and the amount of such expenditures equals at least $5,000. The changes in the bill would apply to any qualified rehabilitation plan placed into service on and after July 1st of 2025. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thanks again. We'll now turn to Department of Revenue for an overview on the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. We are estimating that Senate Bill 227 would decrease state general fund revenues by approximately $600,000 in fiscal year 26, $1.9 million in fiscal year 27, and $3.1 million in fiscal year 27. What we did is, to come up with that estimate, is we looked at the previous historic preservation tax credits that have been issued and came up with our estimate. We're estimating that the bill would increase the total tax credits by around $3.7 million a year. We're assuming that 1/3 would be allowed against the liability and the remaining would be carried forward. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for questions.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. So you kind of looked back at some of the data on the actual usage of this to create the fiscal note? Okay, yes. Thank you. Questions? Representative Sawyer.
Okay, I want to make sure I understood you right. You said $1.9 million in 2027 and $3.1 million in 2027. Did you mean 28?
I'm sorry. That's misprint. It should be fiscal year 26, 27, and 28. My fault.
Okay. Committee, any further questions? Representative Corbett.
Just for maybe a question, do you know how many historical projects we currently have on the books or how many you had to check?
I couldn't get that information for you, yes.
Thank you.
That information might help my question, but are most of these historical, are they government owned, or are they privately owned? Do you have any information on that data, or?
We would have some of that information, and there are a lot of homes that come in and are able to claim the historic preservation tax credit.
Okay, interesting. Committee, any further questions? Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can this be used for a government-owned building, or does it have to be a nonprofit or privately owned?
Well, it can be used for government as well, yes. And then they're able to transfer that credit if they're not able to use it.
Right, thank you.
It sounds like Eric might have some information on Representative Corbett's question.
Yeah, we do have information from the State Historical Society about project specifics. Between 2014 through 2024, there are 818 projects. And we wouldn't know what the ownership is, but they are classified by the project type, whether they're single-family residence, commercial, civic use, or multiple family residences. And then also we do have information about the type of credit. So we do have whether or not it was, they took the nonprofit credit amount, so I can get that really quickly. And of those 836 of those projects look like they had the non-credit or the nonprofit credit amount.
Thank you, Eric. Is that in a report or something you could easily distribute to the committee, or is that kind of a multiple locations?
We have it in a spreadsheet. Depending on what specifics you wanted, I could pull information out pretty easily.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any further questions on the fiscal note? Seeing none, thank you, Kathleen. We will now open up our proponent testimony and welcome first to committee Jennifer Sark.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jennifer Sork, and I represent Clayton Properties and Clock Tower LLC, amongst other companies that own historic buildings. Today, I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you and as a proponent of Senate Bill 227. Kansas has a rich history of iconic buildings which tell the stories of Kansans. The legislature has provided support over the years to encourage the preservation of the buildings by allowing tax credits to be utilized. These tax credits are important as they offset the extraordinary costs, which is often 1 to 3 times additional costs than it would be to put in materials that are not historically accurate. In addition, in order to qualify for the tax credits, a developer or builder or even a single family homeowner must use historically accurate materials that are approved by the State Historical Society, and also often utilize specialized labor, which makes the cost even more extraordinary. In addition to these additional hurdles, the lending market as it is today is tough to obtain financing on the buildings that need to be preserved. The difference between what a normal cost to build and preserve a building with historically accurate materials and labor is not considered by the banks that are often loaning on these type of projects. The tax credits allow for the gap to be filled and bring these projects into appropriate level of funding, making them into turning into reality. Today, we are asking the committee to support Senate Bill 227, which brings parity to communities with populations greater than 50,000 to those that are already eligible for the tax credit.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, are there any questions for this conferee? Seeing none, thank you again for your testimony. Next, I'd like to welcome Blade Magis. My apologies if I butchered that. So.
Nailed it, actually. Somebody recently told me mages like wages, so I'm going to go with that. Chair Smith, Vice Chair Turner, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Blade Magis. I serve as the Executive Director of Wareham Hall. We're a nonprofit organization in Manhattan, Kansas that is renovating the historic Wareham Theater in our downtown. Since 1880, so 145 years, there's been a building standing at that address with the same purpose, and that's bringing the community together over the arts and entertainment. Today, we're working to restore and transform that space into a state-of-the-art performance venue. Transformational projects like ours are somewhat rare and difficult in smaller cities. Unlike major metro areas where there is abundant capital or private equity that can bring these things to life, cities like Manhattan rely on tools like the Kansas Historic Tax Credit to make these types of projects possible. Today, our building largely sits empty, aside from a few movies we show every now and then, but even when we're showing those movies, the building is failing. We showed Frozen the other night, and 2 hours before the show, we were pumping water out of the basement because our pipes were literally frozen. So Princess Elsa paid us a visit. Tragically, our structure is no longer serving its community and its economy like it had for so many years. Senate Bill 227 is a fiscally responsible way to encourage private investment. It supports economic growth. It expands the tax base, especially at a time, as Jennifer mentioned, when lessening risk for developers is critical. When completed, our project will put about $4.6 million into the regional economy every single year. We will be driving business to downtown. We'll bring 40 to 50,000 patrons to our historic district. In the short term, our construction project will create hundreds of jobs over the 2-year period. And long term, we will create permanent, high-quality jobs in industries that are otherwise not really existent in Manhattan, Kansas. Our project is not just about restoring a theater, it's really about strengthening our local economy. Without the Historic Tax Credit project, projects like ours struggle to reach completion. But the program doesn't just benefit developers, it does fuel small business, and I know this firsthand. Before my foray into the nonprofit world, I was a small business owner, started my first business, which was a marketing agency in 2008. And through that experience, twice, we moved into buildings that were the byproduct of historic renovations, commercial properties. To your question about what types of buildings these were, they'd been updated, modernized by local individuals. The first time we moved from one space to the next, we grew from 3 to 7 full-time employees. That might not seem very big, but when you're 22 years old with 7 people on payroll, it's terrifying. The second time, we went from 7 to 16 full-time employees. As we grew into that new space, we actually became a nationwide company. We were a net importer of dollars to Kansas. Without that tax credit, those buildings would not have been redeveloped, and without that, our business may not have grown to the level that it did. So, in closing, Senate Bill 227 strengthens an already proven and effective tool. It ensures historic properties are put back into productive use. Investing in our communities is key to attracting employers, retaining businesses, keeping students and soldiers in Kansas, at a time when Kansas is trying to figure out how do we stop outmigration, how do we remain competitive. This is a great tool that incentivizes private development. It's not a handout, but it's a proven economic tool that drives private investment and strengthens our state. With that, I would urge the committee to support Senate Bill 227 and would be glad to stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So number one, what's the capacity of the theater, the seating capacity? And number two, what's your vision for the types of shows that you'll attract? And number three, will you self-promote or will you work with promoters?
It's a very thorough question. So to item number one, our community actually lacks any kind of a proper performance space that is not our university's performing arts center. So in a seated capacity, we'll have about 550 seats, but our main floor will be terraced, kind of cabaret style seating. So those seats can come out. So if you're gonna have a rock show and people wanna dance around all night, you can have about 800 in the building. Your second question, the types of programming we envision, really it comes down to four main tenets. The first will be promoted shows. So these will be regional and national touring acts that we're bringing in to play. We call that kind of Wareham Presents. The second is really a stage for the community. So these could be local performers, local bands, local theater productions, working with other organizations that are already producing art, but giving them a stage. The third is co-presenting, so we will actually be a place for our local community arts center to present, or a place for Kansas State University students to be able to take performances off campus. And then the fourth is a small amount of our calendar will be rentals, business meetings, functions, things of that sort. If we'll self-promote versus hire a promoter, it'll be a combination of both. It won't be an either or. There's benefits to each, but there's a pretty well-known promotion company out of Kansas City called Mammoth. They do a lot of programming of venues our size, so they'll likely be a collaborator, but we will also book a lot of those on our own.
And then what's your, assuming this goes through, like what's your time frame to get going?
We actually just celebrated submitting our Part 2 application, which is the second step in going through this process to get historic approval. And so that review process will take anywhere from maybe 60 to 90 days. There's federal review involved as well. With that approval, we would start construction hopefully August, and it's about a 2-year build from there. So we hope to be open in the fall of '27.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions, committee? I had a quick one. Sometimes depending on the organization, maybe it's a 501c3 that owns the property, maybe it's a privately held property. Could you speak a little bit to, are there any grants out there that are available for similar projects? What's been your experience on the eligibility that you might have for some of those grants?
To answer your question, brevity is not my strong suit. So yes, the answer is yes, there are grants available. We, for instance, have been recipients of grants through the Department of Commerce. We were awarded a Sprint grant at one point, and every year they do a program for nonprofits called the Community Service Program. So there are things like that that are designed to support projects. At the lion's share of our dollars have been private philanthropy. Pretty much all of our funds raised to date, a very large portion of them have come from donors. At the federal level, from a grant standpoint, they don't love capital projects. They don't love building projects. They love programming. So anytime we reach for federal funding, it's typically under the lens of, hey, we want to bring this program to life, and in order to do that, we're going to need this piece of equipment or this fancy piano or, you know, something, space. Yeah. But for the most part, organizations like the NEA and things of that, there's not a lot of federal grant dollars available for capital projects.
All right. So, yes, Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask if you'd like to share a little bit about the community reaction to this project, because it's been pretty good.
Oh yeah, it's been huge, and there's thank you, Representative Carlin, for the question. We have. For example, we put a community survey out. We garnered over 1,000 responses asking people what they wanted to see in our community. One of the most disparaging, or rather the greatest disparity that presented in a question we asked of these 1,000 respondents, is there performances in our community that meet your interests? And only 14% of people agreed with that, and the rest said no. And so that was really kind of the impetus for us starting this project. We're collaborating with school districts, Kansas State University, Manhattan Arts Center, Boys and Girls Club wants to do an annual talent show. I mean, there's no shortage of opportunities. The amazing thing about our project and projects like these, and it's not just ours, oftentimes these historic buildings reside right in the heartbeat of communities. And whether that's in a historic neighborhood or in a historic downtown, these are these pieces of what it means to kind of be a Kansan. And when we can activate these spaces and enhance these spaces and revitalize these spaces, that really bolsters a lot of community pride. And our project has certainly shown that, even just in a conceptual level.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you all.
Next, I'd like to welcome Terry Humphrey.
Good afternoon, committee, and I have to say, Blade is a tough act to follow, and I am ready to buy my tickets, so anyway, that's fun. So, good afternoon. I am Terry Humphrey. I'm the Executive Director of Friends for Historic Preservation, a nonprofit coalition advocating public policies that promote historic preservation and downtown redevelopment. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 227, a bill that will enhance essential economic development programs such as the historic tax credit. Since it began over 20 years ago, the state's historic tax rehabilitation program has contributed over $1 billion to the Kansas economy. The program rehabilitates deteriorated buildings in rural and urban areas to meet community needs and celebrate our state's rich culture and history. Historic tax credits help bridge gaps in financing needed to bring abandoned and derelict buildings up to code and back into service. Only the state's most significant buildings qualify, and historic tax credits are not issued until the rehabilitation is completed. Kansas property owners can receive a rehabilitation tax credit of up to 40% of qualified expenditures on qualified buildings. The tax credit percentage is tiered based on a city's population. The proposed legislation would bring equity to the state's historic rehabilitation tax credit program, raising the credit from 25% to 40% on large projects in communities whose population exceeds 9,500 people. Today, only projects in cities with a population below 9,500 are eligible for the 40% credit. Examples of historic tax credit projects in your districts include Wichita's Broadview and Ambassador Hotels, Topeka High School, the Lowell School in Salina, Kansas City, Kansas City Hall, which is now used for housing, and the Junction City Downtown Historic District. Friends of Historic Preservation appreciates your consideration of these changes, and I'm happy to stand for questions at the right time, if you have them. I also would like to mention to you that I also serve as Executive Director of AIA Kansas, and AIA Kansas very much supports Senate Bill 227, and we have submitted written testimony for you. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, any questions? All right, seeing none, thanks again.
Thank you.
That is all I show appearing before the committee. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, as a proponent on 227? If not, we have a numerous written testimony to draw the committee's attention to. I show no opponents or neutral. Is there anyone wishing to appear as an opponent or neutral testimony? Seeing none, we will go ahead and close the hearing on Senate Bill 227. And committee, there's a couple of bills I would like to take a look at and see if you wanted to take action on today. Senate Bill 117 and Senate Bill 10. We might start with 117 first if the reviser wants to remind us what that deals with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 117 will expand and clarify the property tax exemption for the Strother Field Airport. The bill would amend a current exemption that exists for the Strother Field Airport, essentially clarifying that the exemption property owned by the political subdivisions that comprise the Strother Field Airport Commission and depicted on the airport's federally approved airport layout plan, whether used for aviation-related purposes, to promote aviation commerce, or to provide revenue to operate the airport, would qualify that such property would be exempt from ad valorem property tax.
Thank you, Adam. Committee, any questions on the bill for the reviser? Seeing none, is there any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, do I have a motion? Our perpetual motion maker is not here. Representative Sawyer.
Mr. Chairman, since my district is right next to Representative Hoheisel, I will make the motion that way. Pass the bill out favorably.
All right. And a second from Representative Francis. We were lost without you, Representative Hoheisel. Okay, so we have a motion by Representative Sawyer, second by Representative Francis to pass out favorably. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next, I'd like to take a look at Senate Bill 10, please. And I'll turn to the reviser for an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 10 also provides a property tax exemption. However, this one is for certain personal property, including watercraft, marine equipment, off-road vehicles, motorized bicycles, certain trailers, and aircraft. Commencing with tax year 2026, any off-road vehicle that is not operated on any highway, any motorized bicycle, electric assisted scooter, electric personal assistive mobility device, and motorized wheelchair. A trailer having a gross weight of 15,000 pounds or less is exclusively used for personal use. Any marine equipment, any aircraft would be exempt from personal property taxation. And additionally, a watercraft would also be exempt from property taxation on and after January 1st of 2026.
Thank you. Committee, any questions for the reviser on the bill? Yes, Representative Stogsdill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any value limit on aircraft or watercraft? And how would you define watercraft?
There is no dollar value limit. The fee or the broadly, they'd just be exempt. The definition of a watercraft would be any, let me get through the right section. Under section 3, watercraft means any watercraft designed to be propelled by machinery, oars, paddles, or wind action upon a sail for navigation on the water, which, if not for the provisions of the section, would be properly classified under subclass 5 or 6 of class 2 of section 1 of article 11 of the Kansas Constitution. So it's the pretty broad definition of what constitutes watercraft.
So I could get a property tax exemption on my Learjet and my yacht?
If they would be currently subject to property tax, yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the reviser? Representative, okay. All right, seeing none, is there any discussion on the bill? Representative Hsu?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was not well prepared for this, but I think I can do this conceptually if this is okay. I would like to make a motion to conceptually amend this bill to remove the references to aircraft. So that'd be primarily page 1, lines 20, and then the definition of aircraft right after that. I like this bill quite a bit more without the references to aircraft.
Okay, so we have a conceptual amendment by Representative Hsu, and it was Representative Alcala or Stogsdill? Either one. I think I heard Alcala, so I might. Okay. I think as long as the committee is familiar with the concept, you know, typically in tax conceptual amendments are just changing the number. This does strike all reference to the aircraft that's in the bill. I think the reviser has a pretty clear understanding. As long as the committee is clear on that, I'll go ahead and entertain this amendment. And so we'll move on to any discussion on the Hsu amendment. Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does this work? Yeah. So this would get Representative's Learjet, but not his yacht.
Representative Sawyer.
Yeah, I'm going to support this motion. I think it's unfair we tax people's cars. You know, you need your car to drive to work and stuff, and then somebody owns a private aircraft, and they wouldn't have to pay property tax on it. So I definitely support this amendment. It makes the bill a lot better.
Representative Stogsdill, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'll have a conceptual amendment as well. This is just for aircraft, correct? Yeah.
Yes, that's my understanding. This is just the aircraft portion, so. Okay. Representative Helgerson. Yeah.
Am I mistaken, or aren't aircraft exempt right now?
I might let the revisor, some are and some aren't, so I might let the revisor clarify that.
Generally, business, commercial aircraft, home-built, and antique aircraft over a certain age are already exempt. So any aircraft that wouldn't fit into one of those exemptions would be subject to property tax.
Could you repeat that again so I understand?
Essentially, commercial aircraft are, for business, antique aircraft. Do you know that? And homemade aircraft are exempt currently under Kansas law from property tax. We'll need to locate the date for what qualifies as antique.
Yes, go ahead, Representative
So
Helgerson.
what we'd be putting on the tax rolls is all of the individual aircraft that is owned by companies, by individuals. And see, I thought that was, there was provisions previously that they were exempt.
Yeah, I think it would just be the personal aircraft that is new enough not to classify as antique. And it'd have to be owned not by a company, but by a person, an individual.
Okay, but if it's owned by a company, it'd be exempt.
That's my understanding.
I believe if it's used for a business purpose. And as Eddie just alerted me, is 30 years is the antique cutoff. So once airplane becomes 30 years old, it would qualify as under the exemption.
Go ahead.
Well, I understand the concern, but there are a lot of people, especially in the Wichita area, that own their planes, pay whatever taxes, and suddenly we're putting them on without even a hearing. That raises a concern in myself. Now, I was sick, and maybe you had a hearing and said you were going to raise the property taxes on the planes, but
I think they're already taxed right now, and what we're proposing is to add them to the exemption.
okay, all right, so you're not, I'm sorry. So your amendment would take them out of the exemption, okay? Which they currently are exempted right now. In this, okay. Okay, keep it current, all right, thank you.
Representative Francis?
Right, but I guess I'm starting to have a little bit of a concern with this amendment. It seems like there's going to be a very narrow class of aircraft owners that are going to be property taxed on this. If you can find a reason to write it off on your business, it's not going to be taxed. But if you're kind of a hobbyist, you will be taxed. Is that right?
Well, it depends on your definition of hobbyist. If it's the home-built aircraft, those should already be exempt. Me as an individual, if I own a little, I don't know, Cessna 182 or whatever the numbers are, I'm not a pilot, but if I own that and it's newer than 30 years old, I'm currently paying property tax on that. So if you remember from the hearing, I think the appraiser said there's very few of these that aren't exempt because the people that do own these either don't keep them in state, or I can't remember exactly what was stated, but they often find a way to put them under their business structure to have them exempt.
And I know my good friend from West Can would probably think of registering it under the Smith Family Ranch. All right, thank you.
If I had one. Representative Kessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I mean, we're talking a very small number, a very narrow stretch of, these aren't big, wealthy tycoon people. These are your neighbors that have, instead of spending $100,000 on a Corvette, spent, $150,000 on a Cessna or something. I mean, these aren't what you're thinking of when you think of private jets like that. I think it's a very, very, very small number.
Did I have a question or comment over here? Representative Corbett, yes.
I think if we could kind of just take our time and knock off each exemption as we go down through this bill, your constituents won't get nothing. So I think when Catherine gave the numbers on aircraft, it was minimal. And boats you use 3 months a year, whatever. But I'm saying this is a good bill the way it came over here. I'd like just to send it back the way we got it.
Representative Sawyer.
As I recall, the fiscal note on this bill was about 17 million to local governments, and most of that was because of the aircraft. That's what I have in my notes.
We can pull up the fiscal note. I thought that was to the state on the 20 mils and the 1.5 mils. I might look to Eddie to see if he can.
So the impact to the state for the bill as introduced was about 2.5 million to the 20 mils, and then about 200, a little under 200,000, I think 190,000 to the two state building funds. I believe that the addition of aircraft to this added $21,000 to the state impact, and so it's a relatively small share of that overall fiscal impact. The local shifting impact would be in the same ratio.
Representative Shu.
Yeah, and just as a discussion point, if I'm recalling correctly, kind of the concept between like the other stuff, which is basically like it's so small that it's not worth for the appraisers to kind of go after them, and they wouldn't recoup their costs. But with like larger aircraft or with personal aircraft, it would be worth it to kind of keep the tax base large. So just additional bit of context that I remembered.
Eddie, did I hear you right? You said the addition of the aircraft added just $21,000? To the state, yes.
To the state piece of it, and that's my recollection. I'm going to try to find that actual number in my notes really quickly here.
Okay, thanks. Any further questions, committee? We'll kill some time here while Eddie's looking for that. Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would there be any wisdom into setting a dollar amount for the aircraft?
I think it either needs to be exempt to be constitutional, either needs to all be exempt. I don't think we could set a threshold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That takes a much smarter person than I. Adam, do you have a? Okay, we'll have the revisers look into that. Representative Sanders. Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Would you help me? A yes vote means what, and a no vote means what? Thank you.
Okay, the amendment by Representative Shu is to remove the aircraft from the bill, so the aircraft that are currently being taxed with personal property tax, should this pass, if you're voting for this, you're voting to keep them on the tax rolls. A no vote, am I saying that right? Okay. A no vote would allow them to still be included in the bill and receive that property tax exemption at that point. And I think Eddie might have come up with the numbers on us.
Yeah, sorry, I was mistaken about my 21,000. I do not know what I was recalling with that. For the 20 mil piece of this, it added 214,000, which is between 7 and 8% of the total cost. So that's between 7 and 8% of the total fiscal impact of the bill is attributable to the aircraft.
Okay, committee, are there any further questions? Okay. Seeing none, Representative Shu, you can close.
Thank you. Yeah, as we kind of go through this committee, we've had lots of conversations about keeping our tax base large, and to the extent that we do. Again, this bill overall is not a huge thing, but I think it makes sense to keep personal aircraft on the tax rolls. I also don't think there's any harm in having kind of a different House position than the Senate position too, and so with that, I move my amendment.
All right. Those in favor of the Shu amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Division's been called. We can do that. It appeared the noes have it. Division's been called. Okay, now, all those in favor, please raise your hand. I didn't. I'm sorry, we've got different numbers here. Do you want to raise your? Okay. And those in favor, please raise your hand. Or, I did in favor. Now, I'm sorry, I'm getting mixed up here. That's not even Friday. Those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, on a count of 11 to 8, the motion carries. My apologies. Okay, we are back on the bill. Any further discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question. How much revenue are we talking about on watercraft?
I don't know that that was split out in the original fiscal note, but maybe it was. I'll let Eddie take a look.
Yeah, I don't think that was split out in the fiscal note. I might be able to come up with that for you here in short order, but I don't want to make any promises in terms of how quickly I can find that.
We'll go ahead and give you a few minutes if there's any other discussion, committee, on the bill. If not, we might stand at ease for just a moment. Yes, for discussion, Representative Smith.
Chair, just a comment. Is it too late to have my vote recorded as a no on that amendment?
No, I should have asked that. Is there anyone that wanted their vote recorded as a no? Representative Smith, anybody, and Representative Sanders, and Representative Butler, Kessler, all as no votes. Is there anyone wanted their vote recorded as aye? No. Representative Corbett, did you want your no vote recorded? Okay. Representative Corbett as a no. Okay. All right. Thank you, committee. Okay. We're going to double check with Department of Revenue on that fiscal impact.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think those are the people that need property taxes. Let's put it on houses and cars and stuff. I agree. Yeah.
What we have immediately is that the total amount of watercraft tax is just a shade over 4 million. In the most recent year, it's 4.1 million. What we don't have is the parsing that out in terms of what's the 20 mils versus the 1.5 mils versus all of the local, because of course, at the local, whatever fraction of that is local is a tax shift to other property, whereas the piece of that that's the 20 mils and the 1.5 mils is reduction in revenue to the state. So that's the information that we have on kind of immediate notice for that. Yeah.
So would it be oversimplifying it to say if we had $4 million and the average statewide mill levy is 125, 1 mil would roughly be, or is that?
I discussed with the Department of Revenue trying to apply the average statewide mill levy, and the reality is there's a possibility that the average mill levy as it relates to watercraft specifically might be a little bit differently due to where they might be located, and so it's not necessarily possible to say exactly that.
Okay. Tax total. Okay. Representative Stogsdill, did that enlighten your question any?
Yes, and I'd like to make a conceptual amendment too to exclude watercraft from this bill.
Okay. Eddie might have some more information.
The only further comment I have in the Department of Revenue is listening and sending in information as we were discussing is that similar to the way that the aircraft were between 7 and 8% of the total, watercraft are about 22% of the total.
Okay. So we have a conceptual amendment. I'll check with the revisers and make sure that's understood. There's a lot more segments in here regarding watercraft if we're pulling those out. Oh, I'll go to the reviser and then Representative Ewerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I mean, I believe the intent's clear to remove watercraft from the exemptions. I mean, they would remain subject to property tax as is currently provided under law. So any reference to watercraft and their exemption would be removed from the bill.
Okay. Representative Ewerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The researcher, Eddie, mentioned a percentage in one of your last statements, about 20%. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, of the total impact of the bill, watercraft are 22% of that impact, the way that aircraft were between 7 and 8%.
Okay. Do we have a second on the Stogsdill motion? Representative Shu. Further discussion on the amendment? Representative Corbett.
It was either the county commissioners or whoever was testifying said that the hassle for his people to go find the boats and get it worked out wasn't worth his time. And that may mean nothing to you, but it seems like when we did this bill, we didn't have many opponents to it. And I mean, you can whittle it down to where your wheelbarrow's exempt and that's it. But I think you're missing the point to what your constituents would like to get out of this. So that's just my thoughts.
Representative Stogsdill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This to me is, watercraft are different obviously than aircraft. Most of these things, everything from jet skis to bass boats to, and believe me, there are some yachts in this state that are hundreds of thousands of dollars. And these are bought mostly by people for recreational activities. It's paid for by people who have discretionary funds to buy these sorts of things. And when we're talking about not lowering the property taxes on people's houses and cars and so on that are necessities, I think that to put watercraft in there and saying if you've got a $150,000 boat and you don't have to pay property taxes on that, I don't want to go home and tell my constituents I'm in favor of that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Eddie, I've got a question that might be for Department of Revenue, but I'm from Wallace County. Our biggest lake is a puddle when it rains. Where is watercraft taxed? Is it wherever it is in the marina? Is it where the owner has it, or? Okay. Might see if the revisor can enlighten us on that, or perhaps Kathleen can. We're asking some interesting questions today.
So I was believing it was where the boat's stored. I mean, I know the car version is where it's, garage, but I'd have to check on exactly the situs of how we tax boats.
Looks like we might have an answer for.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. We believe that the watercraft is taxed at the situs.
So where it's kept and located, not where the owner. So if they have it on a trailer and it's parked at their house and they take it to different lakes, it's taxed at their residence.
It's taxed at their residence.
Okay.
Yes.
But if I'm from Wallace County and I have a boat and I keep it in Wilson or Canopolis or somewhere, it's taxed at that site or in the.
Hello, Chairman Smith and members of the committee. Bob Kent with the Department of Revenue. Watercraft is taxed at the situs, and we believe it should be
22%.
22%.
But what he's asking is if he stores the boat at the lake, is it taxed at the lake site or is it taxed at his residence?
I can't answer that question.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't mean to throw everybody a curveball. That was just a curiosity. I'm not a boat guy, obviously, so just curious, but
I can find out.
okay, yeah, if you wouldn't mind, not right now, but I don't think it really matters to the impact of this amendment right now, but that would be interesting to know, so. Oops, Representative Avercamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding sales tax, I think for a vehicle, my truck, I pay sales tax in the county that I register it. For a boat, somebody's $150,000 yacht, when they purchase that, currently, is that the case where they would register it, they would pay the sales tax? Or how does sales tax work on a watercraft?
The sales tax would be a different issue than the property tax.
I understand that, but part of that is, if we're worrying about, somebody's $100,000 yacht, we're currently doing a sales tax on that. It's a big amount of money up front to the state and certainly locals. We're getting a lot of tax on that single purchase. I think as a justification of taking them off the property tax roll year after year after year, that's where I'm going. I know it's a different issue, but.
I wasn't tracking originally, so.
Sorry about that.
Thanks for making that connection.
Yeah.
All right, any further discussion on the Stogsdill amendment? Representative Avercamp?
Yeah, I think on this one, going back to the spirit of the original bill, right, we're trying to take kind of recreational vehicles, smaller vehicles. Yeah, there's a few watercraft that might be high dollar, but I think most of the watercraft in the state is a small watercraft, and I think it does kind of connect more with the original spirit of the bill. Whereas aircraft, yeah, I think that is easy to see as a much more unique item. I think watercraft, though, it's more reasonable to see it fit with the original intent of the bill. So I would not support the amendment and like to keep them included in the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Smith, did you have a question? Okay. Representative Essex?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just say I am in the boat community, and I will share that the majority of the storage of boats are across state lines for a reason, so they avoid the taxes.
I think we heard that in committee, actually, so, yeah. Representative Smith.
I've also seen, I've heard people that own a house in Kansas and own a house in Oklahoma, they'll tag their vehicles in Oklahoma because it's cheaper. So, I mean, people are always going to try to find a way to make things cheaper.
Representative Corbett?
if you kind of want an industry to grow and sell more boats and get more money, kind of go with the flow. I mean, if you want to just put a smack on them. I got a call when property tax came out from a guy who was retired. He had about a 12-foot John boat, and his property tax, he said, was $89 for a 25-year-old aluminum boat. He was yacked about that. So there's more little small stuff out there than you think, and I think we got to stay with the intent.
Representative Kessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was trying to remember when I have a residence out of, not a residence, I have a house out of state as well, and I registered and tagged my boats and stuff out of state, and I was trying to remember when I was doing that I think they just simply asked me, where's the boat going to reside? Where's the boat live? Or where's it spend 50+% of its time? And it's like, well, you know, there. But the car tags, I think some of them have really cracked down. I think unless you have an out-of-state driver's license, they're probably not doing that anymore. There's some hoops you got to go through to do tags anymore. But yeah, I think it was just simply, yeah, at least in other states, it was just simply where does the boat reside?
All right, any further discussion on the Stogsdill amendment? Representative Stogsdill, do you want to close?
Yes, I just wanted to remind people that, you know, we're using property taxes to basically evict people out of their homes in this state, in a lot of areas. It's certainly the number one issue in my district. And I don't want to go home and have to tell people, I'm sorry, your property taxes are driving you out of your home, but I voted for recreational items like this to be taken off the property tax rolls. And I can guarantee you there are boats in this state that cost more than aircraft. So I think that this is something that I'm going to feel very comfortable talking to my constituents about by supporting this amendment. If you guys think that you can go home and tell your constituents, I voted for property taxes off of expensive boats and so on like that, I envy you. So I move my amendment.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion by Representative Stogsdill to amend. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? No. The noes appear to have it. The division's been called. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And all of those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, on a count of 9 in favor and 11 opposed, the motion failed. We are back on the bill. Representative Stogsdill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like my vote recorded.
Yes, thank you. Any other, see, yours was an aye vote. Is there any other requests to have their vote recorded in favor? Okay, Sawyer, Smith, Chuck Smith, and Representative Carlin. Okay, any votes recorded as a no? Representative Sanders. All right, committee, we are back on the bill. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to Representative Kessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a motion that we pass SB 10 favorably out of committee as amended.
Thank you. A second by Representative Butler. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right. Committee, I think that concludes our work for today. We do have some bills coming up. I don't have a lot that's ready to work tomorrow. I will try to get some information out to the committee so we are prepared and we know what bills are coming if we have some amendments. But with that, we are done for the day. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.